Hello everyone and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, The Lost Planeswalker, and today I wanted to talk about, is Everybody Lives worth its price? Everybody Lives is a brand new card from the Doctor Who Commander decks. For 1 and a white, instant, all creatures gain Hexproof and Indestructible until end of turn. Players gain Hexproof until end of turn. Players can't lose life this turn, and players can't lose the game or win the game this turn. So this is a really unique card that we really haven't seen any new versions of in recent history. You know, this sort of combination of all these different effects kind of harkens back to Tarious Protection, hint hint, I'm going to talk about that later, but we get a pretty wide range of abilities here. First, all of our creatures gain Hexproof and Indestructible. We, or everybody I guess, gains Hexproof, but really we care about ourselves mostly. And players can't lose life this turn, and players can't lose the game or win the game this turn. So this can prevent us from winning the game even, and it prevents everybody else from winning the game. So it can be used, interestingly, not just on our turn, but everybody's turn. So if somebody's going to win the game, or if somebody's going to do something that targets themselves and help them win the game, you can kind of just prevent all that. But I want to start by breaking down this card and kind of looking at similar cards and seeing, is this worth the $20 to $30 to $40 price tag that you can see out there for this card? So to start off, I'm going to look at that Hexproof and Indestructible clause first. I'm going to look at spells that give everything Hexproof and Indestructible. The only two cards I could really find that give everything Hexproof and Indestructible are Joined Shields and Heroic Intervention. Both of these are instants. Each of these is going to give your permanents Hexproof and Indestructible, and Joined Shields even untaps all your creatures for a kind of sneaky response in Selesnya. Heroic Intervention is kind of the best comparison because it's 2 mana, instant, that gives your stuff Hexproof and Indestructible. Now, what if Heroic Intervention had a bunch of other text underneath it? Would it be a better card? Obviously. So it beats out any other choice we have for Hexproof and Indestructible right off the bat. But now let's look at you gain Hexproof, or everybody gains Hexproof, but there really isn't any other card that gives each other player Hexproof as well. So we start off with Blossoming Calm, Lazotep Plating, and Surge of Salvation. Blossoming Calm is a single white that says you gain Hexproof until your next turn, and you gain 2 life, and you also get Rebound, meaning that you can just cast this at the beginning of the next upkeep for free, basically. Lazotep Plating says you and permanents you control gain Hexproof until end of turn. Fantastic. It also gives us a mass 1, so we make a zombie. And Surge of Salvation is you and permanents you control gain Hexproof until end of turn, prevent all damage that black and or red sources would deal to creatures you control this turn. Now, an interesting thing here about Surge of Salvation is that it prevents damage. And in our case here, Everybody Lives does not prevent damage. It gives all creatures Hexproof and Indestructible. So in essence, it's kind of preventing some damage, but you can still wipe the board if you can put -1/-1 counters on everything, which is notable because that's a way to get around this effect. You know, if you have a spell that targets everything, you're not actually targeting anything, getting around Hexproof, and being able to wipe the board clean. Our last two are Metropolis Reformer and Veil of Summer. Metropolis Reformer is an Angel Cleric with Flying Vigilance, and you have Hexproof. And whenever it's dealt damage, you gain that much life. Honestly, one of my favorite cards from the Aftermath set. I think it's just really cool that you can gain Hexproof and just have this cool little angel with you. And then Veil of Summer, this is an iconic card, and it's not super expensive, but it's not super cheap either. Has you draw a card if an opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn. Spells you control can't be countered this turn, and you and permanents you control gain Hexproof from blue and black until end of turn. So it's not protection from everything, but it does give that Hexproof to everything. So as we can see here, I mean, a lot of these are pretty cheap, 1 to 2 mana, except Metropolis Reformer, which is 3. So right off the bat, if we wanted to cast, you know, 2 spells to kind of do what it's doing right now, we'd have to spend at least 3 mana. So yeah, it's good, but is it worth $40? Well, let's look at these next set of cards that are you can't lose the game, your opponents can't win the game, you know, that sort of nonsense. We have a bunch of different effects that do this. Starting out, we have Courageous Resolve, Cloudsteer, Kieran, and Lich's Mastery. Courageous Resolve is a new card from the Lord of the Rings showcase, whatever they're coming out with at this Christmas. You know, it's going to be a cool little, you know, set, I think, of 4 different showcase frames, basically, where they give you all the cards, and then they give you the cards you can play with, so you can have, like, a cool piece of art. But it says, up to 1 target creature you control gains protection from each of your opponents until end of turn. Draw a card. Fateful Hour. If you have 5 or less life, you can't lose life this turn, you can't lose the game this turn, and your opponents can't win the game this turn. Basically doing what we have, but we have this pretty tight restriction saying that we have to have 5 or less life, which is not always gonna be, you know, happening. You might have somebody who's gonna hit you for 70 damage, and you might have, you know, 40 life still, and this card just isn't gonna matter. matter. Cloud Steel Kieran says equipped creature has flying and you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game, meaning you need to reconfigure this onto something, but as long as it's reconfigured, you're going to be okay. And Lich's Mastery, legendary enchantment, Hex Proof, you can't lose the game. Whenever you gain life, draw that many cards. Whenever you lose life, for each one life you lost, exile a permanent card you control or a card from your hand or graveyard. Then when Lich's Mastery leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. So this one definitely has a lot of risk involved. It also is 6 mana to cast, so maybe there's a deck where this really works, but I can't see that right away. And then the other 3 we have is Angel's Grace, Platinum Angel, and the Book of Exalted Deeds. Angel's Grace has split second, meaning that as long as this spell is on the stack, nobody else can kind of react after that point. Everything has to then resolve, which is cool. And you can't lose the game this turn, and your opponents can't win the game this turn. Until end of turn, damage that would be reduced your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. So you can stop your opponents from winning, and you can prevent yourself from losing, but that damage is still going to go through. We kind of see this pattern here where you're getting 2 out of the 3 things that this card can do, but not being able to get that final, either losing the game or, not losing life. Platinum Angel, just, an iconic card. You can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. It is 7 mana for a 4/4 creature, so if you have, negative life and this gets removed, you just instantly lose. And the Book of Exalted Deeds, probably one of my favorite cards from the Dungeons & Dragons set. But at the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, you create a 3/3 white angel creature token. But for white, tap, exile the Book of Exalted Deeds, put an enlightened counter on target angel. It gains you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. Activate only as a sorcery. This also kind of, you have to have angels. This doesn't really work in every deck. Now luckily this makes a bunch of angels, but yet again, if this gets removed from your angel or your angel dies, there's really nothing you can do. So the last card I want to look at is Teferi's Protection, because is it better than Teferi's Protection? That's really the question here. Teferi's Protection costs 2 and a white, instant. Until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out, and then you have to exile Teferi's Protection. Something interesting that you can do here that you can't do with Teferi's Protection is that this is an instant, and it costs 2 mana. So instantly, my mind goes right to Isochron Scepter. Isochron Scepter is a 2 mana artifact with imprint. When it comes into play, you may remove an instant card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand from the game. For 2 mana tap, you may copy the imprinted instant card and play that card without paying its mana cost. Now this is something that the developers of Everybody Lives really had to think about when they came up with this card, because they knew, people were going to think of Isochron Scepter first, because there are strategies where if you have enough mana rock, you can just untap all of your stuff every turn with like Unwinding Clock perhaps, and be able to cast Everybody Lives every turn, kind of stalling out the game indefinitely. And that's definitely something they had to think about. But Teferi's Protection kind of gives us some flexibility that we don't have with, Everybody Lives normally. So our life total can't change, which is different from losing life, but I'm not going to get into that right now. And we also gain protection from everything. Now, protection, we can kind of sum it up with the acronym DET, meaning that we can't be damaged by sources, we can't be enchanted, equipped, or fortified by permanents, we can't be attacked by creatures at all. Our life total can't change, but we can't be attacked either. And we can't be the target of specific spells or abilities. Things that say target. Everything else is kind of fair game. If it says, everybody has to do something, everybody's got to do something. But we can't be targeted. So that kind of gives us a lot of flexibility. Not only does it kind of, protect all of our stuff also phases out, meaning that it can't be interacted with until we get back. So any board wipe or anything that affects anything on our board isn't going to be affected. And if I had to say which was stronger, I still think Teferi's Protection is strong. What I said with Isochron Scepter earlier is kind of a combo setup that, wouldn't be terribly hard to get going, but it's not likely. Teferi's Protection is going to protect you for a whole turn, and if everybody, loses the game, or if there's a spell that's just going to go on the stack that's just going to kill everybody, Teferi's Protection still saves you. Everybody Lives protects everybody, so nobody's going to die, which may be good. Maybe you can win on your next turn and you just need to make it there. But in my opinion, Everybody Lives is not better than Tarious Protection, but Everything Lives is worth it, kinda. I was seeing copies of Everybody Lives going for around $20 or maybe less, and at that price point, I think it's expensive still, but I think it may be worth including. There are not that many effects in this game that can kind of do what this does, especially for only 2 mana. You know, it doesn't have this game countered, so it can still be countered by opponents. You know, it's not broken in that way, but giving everything Hex Proof, Indestructible, you gain Hex Proof and all players gain Hex Proof, and then you can't lose life and lose the game, and your opponents can't lose life or win or whatever. I think that that's really, really powerful. I think this card is kind of living up to the hype that is receiving, but I think in a year, this is not going to be a card everybody talks about, and I could be dead wrong about that. I don't think that this is going to be a card that everybody's going to be like, oh my goodness, do you remember this? Because in the last several years, we've had so many cards that people were freaking out about because, oh my goodness, this is so good. You know, why did they make this card? And then months later, you don't even hear people talking about it anymore. This is definitely going to be maybe not a commander staple just based off the price, but it is going to be a staple that you will see, you know, on your Friday nights at, you know, your local game store or online. I can really see, you know, this card being in a lot of decks, and I am going to pick up a copy myself. You know, maybe not for $40, but I might buy the deck and just tear it out of there because there's a lot of other cool stuff in these decks as well. So yeah, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and you know, what do you think? Am I right? Is this, you know, is this actually good or is this terrible? Is anybody gonna actually play this card? You know, are you gonna play this in your deck? You know, please just let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to see what you have to say. You know, and if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please do so. I usually do a commander deck today, and I will be doing that Friday. I just kind of ran out of time and thought, hey, maybe we talk about Everybody Lives because it's a really interesting card and is worth talking about. But thank you so much, and if you want to help me out another way, please consider leaving a like and sharing this video with a friend. It does help. YouTube does see that, and it does help push my content to more and more people, and I really, really appreciate that. In today's Scryfall card of the day is Syndicate Trafficker. The price isn't negotiable, but I'm sure you'll agree it's fair. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.